All right, everyone. Picking up afternoon activity after the floor. Welcome back. And we are picking up some more work on H-244, Act relating to state contracting standards for advertising. And did we work on some extra language? Yeah, new language? All right,
Yes,
wonderful.
would you like me to say something?
Sure.
Okay, so, before, lunch and floor, we discussed, perhaps, removing the requirement for job and employment postings from the 80% vision in the bill, because it seems like it's complicated and we do not want to make things more difficult or cumbersome for people who are trying to hire jobs that will serve Vermonters. So I believe Ledge Council is ready to speak to a change that was made. And do we have a draft? Did you send it on the draft?
I just did.
You did, wonderful, thank you. Of course, I appreciate you being ahead of time, I should say. So please do, thank you very much.
Almost said morning, everyone, but it is. Hello,
It's the time of day.
John Gray, Office of Legislative Counsel. We're talking H-244 today. We have a super simple amendment, I would say, and I can screen share. Obviously, it hasn't been posted yet, but I have the PDF, so I can go ahead and screen share if that's cool with you guys. And I'm happy to orient if you are wondering what H-244 is, but I think the group knows what it is, so see if I can. Second. Okay. So this is a very simple amendment. We're talking about one strike, one instance of amendment to H-244. Subsection C of that bill concerns the exempted provision. So we're talking about a bill that mandates 80% of that contracting for advertising done by the state go to local organizations. Subsection C talks about the things that the commissioner of BGS can exclude from that 80% total. Previously, this was just, and I'll reference the language here, notwithstanding the subsections above, the commissioner may exclude from the total annual value of advertising services any advertisement focused on tourism. That's what's in the existing bill as introduced. The new language is just this last clause here, and any employment search or job posting. So this would exclude from that requirement to include as part of that 80% figure, any employment search or job. Super simple, but happy to answer questions.
Representative Warren.
But is everything else still now subjected to 80%?
Yes, yes. This is the full list of exceptions.
Yes.
Exactly. So tourism
Yeah.
and employment search or job postings would be excluded from that, but everything else the state is doing for advertising would be required to go through this requirement.
Okay, thank you.
So maybe this is probably not a question for council, but a question. So what would the other advertising types that would apply to this like be if it's not tourism or advertising?
Do you mind?
Sure. Yeah.
Do you mind?
Not at all. No. He's here. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, counsel.
You want me to hop out? Yeah.
Hop out for a second. We will let the witness come up to the table.
Thank you.
Mr. Heinz, how are you?
Well, thank you for allowing me to stay here.
Hey, it's a public building.
Really appreciate you all taking the time to consider this. So, each, I don't have a comprehensive list. I think sort of one of the things we talked about last time is that there really is currently no full accounting for how we spend our advertising dollars, which we think is part of the problem. And that's why we have that last section of the bill, which requires more transparency. So it would require BGS each year to actually tell us how much money is being spent on advertising, where it's going. And I think that information could be really useful because when we tried to figure out this in the first place, all of the information is scattered around from department to department. So it's really hard to say. But if you just imagine every every department agency in the state does some form of advertising. If you think about liquor and lottery, the way that they advertise, it's often small, sometimes it's big. I do think that the two, this is not data you should take to the bank because it's so hard to get reliable data here. But our sense is that the two big pieces of this puzzle are tourism and marketing, or tourism, I should say, and employment ads. And I think with these suggested changes of moving those out of there, I think that removes a lot of the sort of more challenging parts of this bill. Those are the two places where you really are, as a state, trying to reach people who are not in Vermont. And we think that for the most part, as far as we know, every other sort of type of advertising the state does, you're really trying to reach Vermonters. And if you're trying to reach Vermonters, we think that using our television stations, our radio stations, digital and our print media is the most effective way to do that. I don't know if that actually really answers your question, but
Enough.
I think the fact that we don't know is sort of part of the problem that we're trying to solve here.
Okay.
Could I answer a question I was not asked?
Fire away.
Yes.
Way to position.
Never stopped me before. But one of the witnesses this morning said something that really stood out to me, which was, what's the hurry here, right? Why don't we take it slow? And I appreciate and understand that concern. I know that you all really want to and need to be very deliberate in what you do. But I think the answer to the question of what the hurry is that our smaller, especially our smaller, more rural news organizations are dying. Every week, every month, every year, they're getting smaller. And it's a real crisis. So in my mind, this is not a situation where we can think for a couple of years about what is the best solution to solve this problem. This is the sort of thing that once you lose that community weekly, it's not coming back. And I think many of you have seen that in your communities and your districts. We're really trying to ward off more of that. We know that this will not solve the problem, but any publisher will tell you that every little bit counts, every additional advertisement counts. And we think even if this doesn't move the needle a whole lot, I think if it reorients the state and really kind of pushes the state to think first about local, knowing that they still have they have wiggle room, right? There still is that 20%. So it's not saying don't advertise on social media. It certainly isn't saying don't post on social media. It's just saying if we're going to spend, our taxpayer dollars, let's spend it, where we know that money will stay in the community and lead to well-reported news. I'm happy to answer other questions that haven't been asked, or to get out of your hair, whichever you prefer.
No. I personally don't have any other questions. Tim, Representative Hagan.
It's not really a question, it's a comment. I really appreciate the addition of excluding employment advertising because I think that's one of the big things we do. And I appreciate that there's going to be a report. However, I would rather not specify something specific like 80% when we don't even know what we're spending right now. So I would like to have the information ahead of time and then decide what percentage to specify. So that would be my objection to this bill, but it certainly is much better than it was a couple of hours ago. And I appreciate that very much.
All right. Rep. Nugent. And Morgan, did I see a Morgan? Okay, Nugent, then Morgan.
I was just wondering, I don't know if you can speak to this or in the discussions, seems like it would make sense to me that administration's on board with the concept and the spirit of it, but I don't know if we asked that question.
I can tell you this, there's been a lack of availability of some witnesses who could specifically speak to that, at least within our confines of Cross River. So my personal feeling is that there will be plenty of time to address any percentage issues, or I think it's really important. That's a good point, Rep. Nugent. It's really important to hear from every, party and department and whoever is involved in this, who has taken it and who really has an opinion and a voice. Those all need to be heard. It just didn't work out timing wise at this point, but I'm pretty confident that Senate GovOps is ready to address that kind of first thing.
I would also add that we have the support of Lieutenant Governor Rogers and Secretary of State Copeland Hansis. We have kind of bipartisan champions who I think both see the need for this going forward. I certainly wouldn't want to make assumptions about the administration, but I know this administration has been very supportive in the past of initiatives to support the press, including with the Media Shield law, which the governor championed and signed. So my hope is that they'd be open to the conversation at least. And we've made sort of initial outreach to the governor's office around this and hope to follow up at the appropriate moment.
Representative Morgan.
Yes, thanks. I understand the spirit of this bill and it has merit. So I'm certainly not saying it doesn't have merit, but 80% for me is just a bridge too far. That's a high bar. And for example, I certainly believe in buying local for everything you can. I know people, you hear in various circles decrying like Amazon and places like that you can mail order from when you could buy local. And I use in case in point for our dogs, we use a local vendor in South Burlington and that owns a couple of pet food stores. Probably there's some things we buy from them we can get cheaper, but I buy from because they're friends and I believe in supporting their small businesses all day, every day, where possible. But I just think that this is just too high a bar because it has some unintended consequences of tying our hands potentially with that number. What's a good number? I don't know, but I don't think we've taken enough look at this. I know we say it could be corrected or fixed or made better by the other body. I get that. But I'm also not a big fan of pushing that off on somebody else. So I struggle with this bar in this bill.
All right. Rep Coffin.
I have a more commentary. The number if we're sending forward a percentage, when we see on the last, I don't know the last version, but when we had the last discussion, we had the chart of where the advertising spending was, they were at 65%. They could, if we look at that and use that as just a figure, if instead of having it at 80%, if we were at 70%, it gives wiggle room in there for them to try, if they're not advertising out, but they do need more internet advertising because the costs of it, and it's not available here in the States. And I know we're not talking jobs now. We're talking jobs for the print shops, but we're not talking job advertisement. There's still a large amount of digital media that's done. And we don't have that here in the state. If we were at 70%, that may be more an achievable goal than 80%. Just my to make a compromise that it still puts the majority of the funding to the state, but gives some wiggle room that we can revisit, or the Senate if the Senate has time to revisit that number. But I think starting at a 70% is a more achievable goal because goals should be measurable, achievable, realistic. And I think if they can hit 65% accidentally, they could hit 70% intentionally.
Could I answer a question that wasn't asked again?
Sure.
I think that's a great point. And I think, I, speaking only for myself, would be comfortable with that sort of a compromise. Because I think that, our research is partial. But what we have found is of the advertising we've identified, we think about 60% at least. We think about 60% is spent locally. And I was really impressed to see that DHR is spending 65% at least of that bucket. That's encouraging to me. And I think, it's important to us as news organizations for this to be a tripartisan initiative. We think the media serves everybody. We don't. So I think in the spirit of compromise, I think we'd be open to that and to keep the conversation moving forward. And I think it is, as you say, it's about sort of moving in the right direction and being more intentional about our money. So again, not up to me, but I think that's reasonable.
I said, and then raised my hand.
It's all right. I thought I already gave you the green light. Representative Waters.
Thank you. If Ledge Council could make that change for us at the moment, I think Representative Rangelson and I had discussed earlier that the lower amount would be appropriate. I think I can safely speak for her that as the co-sponsor of this bill, maybe that would be acceptable to her. Would you like to? Is it okay if she comes and talks?
Oh, no, of course. Yeah, please,
Yeah,
please.
sure.
Hi, Wendy Mays. I'm the Executive Director of the Vermont Association of Broadcasters. And I wasn't planning on speaking, but I just wanted to answer your question because I actually have an answer to it. So I wanted to let you know that it is entirely possible to purchase digital advertising through local, every television station in Vermont, for example, and some of the radio stations offer digital advertising. It's available. You can purchase it through them. So I just wanted to let you know that because it would be so much better if, Vermont taxpayer dollars were going to, WDEV or Vermont, WCA. I hate to call out, individual stations, but I just wanted to say that, instead of it going directly to Meta or Google, it could go through them and stay here and help with the news collections. I just wanted to say that because it came up specifically and I wanted to answer that.
Okay. Yeah, just so you know, when I was referring to that, it was because of the job advertisements and what I saw there not available.
Yeah.
So, no, I appreciate that.
Okay.
That's a thumb. Okay, cool.
Representative
Representative,
I have a
yeah.
question. Does anybody in the room know? And maybe this is a question for Ledge Council, if this money is state money that we're mandating is spent or all money? Because a lot of these agencies get federal money in order to, for instance, advertise for some program the state has going on.
I mean, I
Do we
could
know?
make a reasonably educated assumption. But I think that's something I'd probably defer to council on. My assumption is that it is state dollars that are being brought in through like state coffers and revenues and or federal dollars that come in that are allocated to the agencies to spend.
Okay, so in
But it is,
terms
once
of,
it's in that bucket, it's become their charge.
so in terms of federal dollars, we cannot dictate how federal dollars are spent. So that's a commerce thing.
Let's ask that question. Because I think once it goes into a coffer of sorts, sometimes it becomes fungible with other dollars.
Yeah, who do we ask?
My council.
So I don't honestly know the answer to that specific question. I think the way that the language works, it's just sorry. This is specify what the source of funds would be for that state contracting, but presumably it could always choose for it to be state dollars that goes. I don't know that it's a practical hurdle.
Yes, that,
You couldn't see that I stopped.
oh, yeah, that's a big,
Rep. Nugent?
I was just gonna say, and that's just from my viewpoint, but as far as I know, usually federal dollars, I don't think get, the ones I've been experiencing, right, not that specific as far as what you spend it on. It's more like the type of expense, so it would be like you could either spend it on media or not, but if you're spending it on media, I've never seen anything in contracts I've ever seen that dictates that it has to be either local or not, or anything like that specific.
but if you're gonna restrict it, I've been told that in this building that you cannot restrict federal dollars. The state cannot restrict how federal dollars are spent. So if you have like a federal grant program and you're gonna spend that money on a state program. If you have a federal grant that you're gonna spend money on a state program. You cannot restrict how that program spends that federal money.
I think I understand it really depends on the agency and their.
Okay,
But
Yeah.
I think that Beth would have raised that earlier.
Well,
how they
that's-
deal with their money.
that's why I wanted to talk to BGS because Beth Fastigi is there specifically employment. We have now removed employment from this. My point is, I don't think we have enough information to accurately and appropriately pass this bill. The Senate has the exact same bill. They could work on it and they could do all the due diligence. They could get BGS in, who declined to come in and speak to us due to time constraints. And I don't have enough information to make an appropriate decision on this bill. So I may go to my other meeting and not even vote on it, which would be a shame. I just feel like we have not taken the testimony that we need because we're just figuring out what testimony we need to take. That's where I'm at with that.
Thank you.
Yep, and I'm gonna have to leave in 2
And
minutes.
an analogy on the federal dollars funneling through, I know, since schools ultimately have trickle down federal money, they cannot prohibit the military from coming in to set up potentially quasi recruit kind of thing. So I don't know if that's a good analogy, but I do know that applies, even though I think a lot of schools violate it. But I don't know if that is a nexus that's similar or not,
So
but
instead of sitting here and like hypothesizing
Yeah, we could.
ourselves.
yeah.
Is there a way we could find that out sooner than later? Is that something that?
So I think the only question that's actually being asked is what dollars are being used to advertise with, because I think we all agree, obviously, that there are federal dollars to which there are strings attached. The question would just be what funds are being used for advertising. We're talking about programs that have strings attached. The only restriction that you're envisioning happening here is if there's a program through which advertising is happening that is being federally funded. So if we're talking to agencies just generally engaging in advertising, that's fine.
Representative Hooper and then Waters.
I would suspect like advertising for foster care and social services is probably the role tie-in. So money is a lot of the transportation programs that deal with highway traffic safety and stuff like that is probably part of the. So there's sources that could go to find out how much.
Yes, it'd just be a question like where we're getting those dollars.
I understand.
I'd love to know where the money's coming from for the commissioner of corrections to be on television 5 times a day.
That's a different question. That's maybe more of an H67 question.
Steps.
So
I need to go.
first making that amendment
Yes.
happen. Let's get
Yes,
that done.
Ledge Council just made the change.
And
Thank you.
We need to vote on the amendment?
No,
No.
because the bill is open in committee.
yes, it's an edit. So if you look at your, if you look at the committee website, you're looking at the right draft, the drafts are what get me every time. At any rate, I think, there are some questions, outstanding on the issue. I think, of course, I think you probably all know that I do not want to wait and just hope that the Senate takes this up. I think we reached a couple good compromises today with lowering the percentage amount and with exempting job and employment postings from it. I think also that the finance question that Rep. Hango was just asking about, I know that that state departments and agencies cannot just spend money willy-nilly however they choose. I know that there are parameters put on them frequently and all the time, and that is something that happens in this building regularly, in the the things that the General Assembly produces. So I feel like those are certainly questions to be asked. My hope is that they are not detriments to continuing the conversation and voting on the bill. If somebody felt okay about moving it and voting on it today, I would be excited about it if there was support for it. If there were questions that were still open, I could try to find some more answers and would be fine to postpone the vote for tomorrow. I think it's just I mean, you know how I feel. I think we know how a couple others feel in the room. It's just, you know, I'm okay for everything, but I can't speak for everyone here, whether or not they're ready to vote on it or not. So, you know.
Mr. Morgan? No, I think I actually had a Cooper before Morgan.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yep.
Is there a window if we stuck something in Parliament without like eligible? 70% of eligible funds. And taking the counting problem rather than just a problem. Some funds,
I totally hear what you're saying.
some funds by the grant capacity are not eligible for that type of application.
Yeah. Because I was thinking about saying like state funds, but I think eligible funds actually is cleaner. Because it opens up the door to federal dollars that would be appropriate for the purpose of.
Yeah, like if you think back to COVID, all they had.
I think that's an elegant word for this moment, Bob.
It's probably federal.
Is that a thing?
No.
So you can do a concept like that. It's actually not as simple as just slotting that in because the way that the language currently works is not less than, in this case, 70% of the total annual value of the print for advertising services. So you would need to do something like paid by state fund. I mean, you could add something like paid by state funds at the end of that to accomplish that.
Thank you.
Okay.
That'd be an easy thing to do if you're just trying to have something right now.
Yeah, I hesitate to do it right now only because as well intended and as agreeable as it is, sometimes right now causes problems that we don't anticipate. And yes, thank you for that. That is an excellent point and a good idea.
Just one other way I might do is paid by non-federal funds because perhaps there's other dollars that somehow.
Yeah,
Even if that might qualify for the match,
right,
so that makes state funds.
There's a lot of variables in there.
right. Just why, in my opinion, it could be something, a conversation to continue in Senate governance if when it gets done.
Okay. So, yes, Representative Morgan.
Yeah, I think the bill is well intended, don't get me wrong. But we've pushed it a little too quick. We have not heard from BGS, who is a major player in this, in my opinion, at least the way I read this. And them not having time to get in here in time, it speaks volumes in terms of if we haven't, they don't have time to get here, it means we haven't done our due diligence on it, in my opinion. But that's me. I may be the only person thinking that. That's okay. Bill, I believe, has noble intentions, and I'm all about staying local. Trust me, wherever we can. Agree, we should spend our Vermont dollars in Vermont. There's no question. But I think we would need to hear more. Just for me. I might be alone.
You got it.
I like this bill. I think it's important to support our local communities and, you know, access to democracy, all these things. And so therefore, I don't think we let perfect be the enemy of like moving this through. My gosh, like if we did that, we'd never sort of go out of this committee ever. And that's the beauty of having this building set up the way it is, because it can go to the Senate. It can continue to get testimony. It can continue to be tweaked and whatever. So my opinion is that we pass this out before crossover. And if we do it in the next 30 minutes or tomorrow, it doesn't matter to me, but it does matter to me that we pass it.
Just ditto.
That was a ditto, the informal, formal ditto. Representative Coughlin.
I would like to see in there that it doesn't hamstring us on federal fund use. That we could have that, something about state funds or the state eligible funds to it. But also I'd like to, if there's any way possible, we get somebody in here tomorrow to speak more to it.
We've had difficulty with that from a primary. Oh, yeah?
It's,
Okay, so for the sake of clock and the sake of the other things we have to do, is the committee agreeable to putting in some language here and then finding time in our, because we have the luxury of some space tomorrow, but I want to say this out loud and clearly that we have H 397 to focus on and finish. So this needs to be crisply set up and vote. Are we cool with that? Or tomorrow? Tomorrow.
I have a question, which is, if ever, you don't need to let me know right this second, but anyone who is saying that it's not something they can support right now because they're missing information, I would love to know exactly what information is missing, like, so I can go find out and let you know. And then that way I can answer the questions so that tomorrow, when we talk about it again, we are not faced with more unknowns, and rather we are answering whatever questions we have. And hopefully can, allay any fears and or set the Senate up for a good conversation to help them know what comes next. But I would love to know like really specific things that we don't know that are necessary to get support for it.
Pangos and mortgage.
So total advertising dollars that the state spends of state money.
I can tell you right now, they don't know.
Okay, so then in my case, that's a non-starter to pass the bill.
Okay.
To not know how much of an unknown, we know how much, 80% or 70%, whatever's in the bill currently, of unknown.
The problem, the reason why they don't know is because there is across many different agencies, and as you know, all government agencies, I would say within an agency, they don't even know what they're spending on anything a lot of the time. So that speaks to maybe another bill we passed out of this committee earlier this week that perhaps could help solve that problem.
I actually just referenced that within the context of this
But
conversation.
so what I'm saying is, if that is a non-starter for you,
It is.
then it's a no for you in any context at all. Is what you're saying.
I think now, yes,
Okay.
it is.
All
Good to know. Thank you.
Yeah.
Nice.
Can I ask?
I got a Morgan, I got a Hooper, and then I got a Hooper. And then we're shipping you.
Yeah, it's not a fear, it's due diligence is what I'm talking about. And I don't think we've done our due diligence on getting the proper testimony on this bill. I don't know how many more ways to say it. I'm not trying to be nasty or confrontational here. I just think that we do our due diligence elsewhere. I think we ought to be doing that here. Again, it's not a fear, not fearful of anything. I'm just thinking that we need to do our work correctly. And I think be blunt, this has been rushed. This is too quick without the proper testimony in place. And I don't know how else to say that. I'm trying to be pleasant and polite about it, but that's how I feel. So I'm one of the no's.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Representative Hooper Burlington.
There's probably not a way to get buildings in GS, whatever, but everybody has somebody that knows what they're spending money on. The Agency of Human Services has an account that's responsible for knowing where to put the codes on the numbers. So we don't have time to do it, but if we had 3 agencies that got a lot of federal money, they could, that individual, and then tell you what the restrictions were on it. And it would be generalizable, I think, to some degree, but that's probably more time consuming than,
Representative Hooper Randolph.
Your counterparts at the head of the table.
You may do whatever you please, sir. The question is the table is yours.
Madam Vice Chair, what is the importance of knowing that figure?
Because I don't know whether you're asking for 80% of $20,000 or you're asking for 80% of $20 million. I don't want to be for 70%, whatever it happens to be currently in bill. Apologies that I had to step out. So I also, we didn't even hear from anybody who wasn't media until this morning. So I'm trying to digest what a big thing this is for the state to change their policies on how they do things. And I have great sympathy for local media because in my area, it has just fallen off the radar. It hardly exists anymore, which is very sad. And it makes it hard for us to get any information about anything, school board that I'm on, this particular position that I do. But we've found other ways that are working and are pretty cost effective. So now we're in that groove and I don't know how to, in one simple bill, the way the state is doing what they do to do business. So that's mine.
All right.
And for, the ranking member, how could it be that we can't find out that number?
So the reason we can't find out across the board what every department or agency spends on advertising is because they don't have clear systems for keeping track of that. They might know how much they spent last month, or if, maybe they had a big push and 12 people, or, they decided to do an ad campaign about, clean needles, let's say, for instance, and, and that was a push that they made and spent a lot of money on advertising in September, and then spent zero money on advertising for the year before. They don't clearly keep track of those funds. You know what I mean? So in order to get like a full picture, and this is kind of the problem in general, right? Is that people are spending money in little buckets, and there's not like, I work as the ad person for the health department, like the Department of Health. You know what I mean? Like it comes in dribs and drabs, and there's not always a clear system for tracking the way those funds are spent. It would be delightful if there was, but there currently is not.
This bill, I would think, could help facilitate some cleanup to that effect.
One would think. There's a theme here, in theory, of transparency, of accountability, of making sure that.
It feels like there's opportunity there to satisfy some of the concerns I know.
I would hope so. Yeah. And, as Rep. Hingo just pointed out, these media outlets are dying. And I think it really ties in even what we were talking about this morning with our elections bill, which is that communities that have local free press have more engaged voters. Their budgets are less, their town budgets are less. They have people who are more concerned with issues. They have more participation, all of these things,
Right.
like the foundations of our government. So if we as a state have some money that we are spending on things that could bolster all of those other good things.
Do you think it's fair to say that if we wait till next session, we're gonna assuredly lose some of those groups?
100%.
I think you're right.
Yes,
Oh,
100%. It's dire.
Well, that's the reason I ask. Lisa, is it a large number that you would prefer, a smaller one, or a range?
No, I just don't like making decisions without knowing all the facts. And Chair Byron will attest to this. I am somebody that has to be absolutely sure of what I'm doing. I can't just say, hey, it's probably a great idea, pass it over to the Senate and see what they do with it. I'm not that person.
Well, I can appreciate that.
Thank you.
and I can attest to that.
Yeah.
One last thing, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, please.
Would you prefer to vote today and just get it on, or?
I would. I don't believe that anyone who is currently spoken against it is going to change their mind with any new information. I would like to have the whole committee here to vote if possible. So if we are, I mean, it's not up to me, it's up to the chair. So it.
That's not true.
His discretion. Okay, I'm so sorry.
Well,
Then we're gonna shift gears. What we're gonna do is we're gonna give council time. We have Mr. Burke here for the next bill. I want a timeout on this one. We're gonna shift gears to that one.
please don't stare at me like that.
Timeout,
I'm so sorry. I was.
time out, everyone.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I just did it again.
Take us offline.